Okay, over the years, people have been trying to solve what the uses are for, or use was for, well, it's called the Roman dodecahedron. And at this point, now we're not even sure if it is an actual Roman invention. It could be a Celtic dodecahedron or some other culture or civilization's invention. I personally am still going to stick to the idea that this was an invention by, well, I could say the Romans, but for my purposes, for my analysis of what this could possibly be, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be Roman, right? I believe that these are aerial projectiles, and my analysis comes from the fact some of what is backed up by what Mr. Paul Whitewick is saying about there's no wear and tear on these things. So these things that have survived intact without use, something like 128 of them, just have not been used necessarily. His ultimate analysis is, and the end is that are used in some sort of a ritualistic method. But I disagree with that assessment strictly because I think that this thing was too difficult to make, or not too difficult to make, but it lacks the utilitarian uses of a precious, what would be a sort of semi-precious metal back then, and something that is technologically advanced enough to perform certain functions. And one of those functions is this, and we'll look at the paper in a little bit. I think there's only one paper that I was able to find that talks about the aeronautical effect of something of a dodecahedron spinning through the air. Does it make a weird whirling sound or a screaming sound or something like that? And in the paper, this research that it was done, and I will pull that up later. It does say that at different speeds, when a dodecahedron is flying through the air, it creates a whistling-like sound. But it also goes on to say that the nodes, because if you look at a dodecahedron, and you'll have a better look at it when it comes up further, the nodes are capable of flying off. So if you can imagine, it's flying off like a bullet, in my opinion. So I believe these are weapons of war, and that they were used as fired in volleys. You could fire them in volleys, and it would make a whirring sound, which would be terrifying. Can you imagine 1,000 of these things flying towards you, different sizes, making different sounds with different sized bolt knobs on the end of them, which has been proven in a study that I'll bring up later, that they fly off at a certain speed or on impact. So if that ball, which has 12 balls on it, makes impact or gets close to making impact, that's 12 balls flying out, similar to like bullets or shrapnel. And that is what I believe the dodecahedron could have been used for. I don't know. It could have been a different reason why, but this is my belief as to why these, or what the purpose of these dodecahedrons were for, and that they were projectile items that could break up and form separate shrapnel bullet-like projectiles, injuring groups, armies in groups to great effect. I mean, it's a small little metal thing puncturing you will stop you from marching. So let's hear what Mr. Paul Whitewick has to say, and get on with what he has to say. Okay, so we'll have to press play wherever he is. Here he is.
Roman The Roman Dodechahedron, the mystery has finally been solved. These objects, which are sort of maybe 2,000 years old, the 300-year-old mystery as to exactly what these were used for has finally been solved, at least according to you lot in the comments section of the last video. 5,000 of you said you knew exactly what it was. I'm not completely convinced. Not convinced that I don't think it's been solved, but not convinced that some of your theories are right. Instead, I have my own theory on exactly what these were for. I do feel like I have solved the mystery. So this is indeed the last.
I would just like to interject right here that one of the points that he brings up is that and it's just about to bring it up about using these things as sort of like a utilitarian object for like weaving or making baskets or making gloves or making things. There's no sign of wear and tear, right? This would be first of all, it would probably be a very inefficient way of making weaving. You have wood. Wood is much more plentiful and more pliable or malleable or pliable to use to make for weaving. And we have archaeological proof throughout the ages that wood material is used for weaving, not metallic balls with spikes with spikes or balls on the 12 corners of them. So any kind of utilitarian purpose for these things doesn't really seem to hold up to me. So let's just continue on and see what he has to say.
Last video I will ever make on the Roman dodecahedron. Now, if you're new here, you might be wondering what I'm on about. Well, I'm on about this object, the Roman dodecahedron, and a while back I made a video about just these and where we had found them, what areas, where they came from, and a little bit of speculation as to what exactly they could have been used for. And of course, over 5,000 of you commented on exactly what you thought they were for. So then I made another video about these objects, about an archaeological group that found one and then sort of claimed that nobody could have the intellectual property, no one could see it and copy it and sort of make another model of it. Anyway, okay, so I never really had the opportunity to sit down and sort of just consider these objects and what they could have been for in the last video. I sort of really concentrated on the history and where we found them to see if that could help us. But someone's kindly made me all these 3D models, and they're accurate in terms of the markings and the hole sizes as a comparison of the other holes. So all of a sudden now I can sort of take the time to consider what they were for. Last time I think I came up with the ritual, as in they were used as a ritual purpose. I don't think that's true. I've got a new theory. So the Roman dodecahedron, just look at that absolutely gorgeous object, really intricately made, and there's one over there for you lot if you're looking from that camera. A lot of you said in the comments section of the last videos, Paul, I think you'll find, but I'm not.
I just want to interject here that they are different sizes. So if you think in terms of projectiles and like some sort of like an ordnance, you have to have different size projectiles for different distances and for effect as well. So that's something that I want you to bear in mind, or at least I want to bear in mind, as to why there would be different sizes of dodecahedrons. It's possible they could have multiple purposes, distances to reach their target, and force and so on. So let's go on.
Not actually Roman, and you'd be right, to be fair, because we found 128 of these, and none of them have been found in what you would consider the Roman heartland, Italy, the Mediterranean, Greece, nothing at all in that area.
And I want to interject right here when he says nothing at all found in the heartland of what is Roman territory. Well, there's a good reason why it might not have been found in these may not be found in the Roman heartland if they were used by Romans. This is because they were used in campaigns outside of Roman empires. In other words, conquering the Iberian Peninsula, going up to the British areas and Germanic tribes and stuff like that. You would find them there because those were the frontiers of the battles that were being fought with projectiles outward rather than having them within, say, the Roman papal state, the Roman states and stuff like that.
And of course we have no writings about these, no Roman writings, we have no drawings, contemporary drawings, absolutely nothing from that era suggests that it is actually Roman, apart from the fact that it came from the Roman era in terms of the layers and the context. So perhaps, as this has been suggested, they're more like a Celtic Roman dodecahedron. Okay, so before we get on to my idea, my new idea, and of course we'll cover some of yours too for context, let's just cover some of the characters.
I disagree with the idea that it's a Roman Celtic dodecahedron, because if we go back to the map and stuff, it doesn't come from, it doesn't strictly come from the Celtic area. It came from the areas where Romans were making advances, and in the Germanic areas, Iberian Peninsula, Celtic areas.
Characteristics, because it's hugely important for us in today's discussion. Number one, the location. We've already discussed the location, very much outside of what we would consider the Roman and Greek heartland. So we can safely say that these really weren't a traditional Roman object for whatever reason. Number two, well,
if you look at that map, most of them seem to be found in France, the French area.
We have 12 sides, and we have nodules on every single angle. Every angle whatsoever, we have nodules. We have holes on every face, and they seem to increase in size as we go around. They don't seem to be completely random. So if we start with a smaller one, we follow a route around it and we get bigger and bigger, or we get smaller and smaller, whichever way around you want to look at it. Whichever one of
Right, and the like a whistle, you have to increase the aperture and decrease the aperture to perform different sounds to make different sounds. Also, and it could have to do with aerodynamics as well. And we're going to get to that paper. I think I'll probably have to get to all the way to the end of the video, and then I'll introduce the paper. Either I'll cut it in at some point, or we'll just go over the paper. It's a very short paper. They did not do a lot of research. A lot more research could have been done at the end. So we'll continue.
One of these we take, we have no sort of obvious markings and symbols that would allow us to pinpoint it to an area or a tribe or anything at all. We have nothing. We also have no markings that are really obvious in terms of where.
Right. When he talks about not having any markings of where, it's very hard to bring up that it's a possible symbolic or ritualistic item if it doesn't represent where it's from and it's found over a vast area of places. So this doesn't really seem to hold up to be any kind of a ritualistic item. And certainly something of this much value back in the Roman era, which lasted for thousands of years, would be a very high value item, so it would be a high value item. Now, whether or not you would use it as a projectile in war or something, you're certainly not going to use it for an everyday utilitarian object. It's used for something that has significant importance for a specific project, unless they just made them and wanted to put them on the windowsill and take a look at them, and I doubt that very much.
No, I haven't got a clue what it is either, but it's been several months since this Roman artifact was discovered in a field in Lincolnshire.
Now, since the time of making that video, I still now receive comments today, even today, a year and a half on, I think it was like early 2024, about your theories. I think it was this, I think it was that, and somebody else's theory. Here, look, here's a YouTube video, this person has solved the mystery. So I want to quickly dive into that in this chapter. Okay, so what I did is I took 5% of the comments from the last video. So we had like 5,000 comments, so I took 250, and that gave us 20 separate ideas, 20 separate hypotheses as to what exactly the Roman dodecahedron could be used for. Now, you could probably then break that down into some subcategories, but we'll try and keep this as simple as we can. Let's dive into this. knitting and weaving. And many of you have pointed me in this direction to this video or this video. I'm saying a big no to knitting or weaving or sort of glove making. Well, then surely we'd find them outside of just that Celtic area.
And as we also said, why on earth would you use such an object like this for knitting and weaving when wood has always been used and with great efficacy? So knitting and weaving, obviously not. I mean, this is kind of a ridiculous idea, in my opinion.
And of course, why are we seeing so few? We've only found 128 of these. That's not many. And of course, we don't see any wear. So there's quite a few negatives there for that theory or that hypothesis. It's not for me. Rat's tail bobbin. Rat's tail bobbin. I don't even know what that is. Bobbin sounds like kind of some knitting, weaving idea. And a lot of you suggested this idea, so forgive my naivety and lack of understanding of that subject. I'm going to say no because, again, we don't have any wear. Chainmail maker. Chainmail maker is kind of a good one. I like that idea. But again,
chainmail maker. How do you come up with chainmail maker with that? It's sort of like picked out of thin air. First of all, we do have documentation about how chainmail was made from blacksmiths, and nothing has ever like this has ever been linked to making chainmail. So this is just a bit of idea pulled from thin air, which we can put back into the air.
Again, if that were the case, we'd find more, and we don't. And if that were the case, we would also have more wear on here. We'd have bits that were perhaps broken. Every single one of these found with pretty much intact and pretty much uniform holes. It doesn't add up, at least for the lack of wear reason, probably more. Okay, well, size checker. Size checker is an interesting one because, again, a lot of you commented on this. So in other words, the idea is you'd grab a coin and you'd be able to check the size of it. It would fit in, it wouldn't fit in. But what we've got to remember is a lot of these objects, a lot of these Roman dodecahedrons, well, they're all different sizes themselves. None of these are the same. I don't think.
I just want to interrupt him here. That actually the size checker seems to have more legitimacy than anything else said thus far. And when he says that, well, here you are, you have three different dodecahedrons of different sizes. Well, you are measuring different sizes of gold coin or silver coin. Obviously, you would have to have different sizes if you were not using scales. And I have a stinking suspicion that you would not be using this to check the size, because there would be some other problems with that, such as quality, the genuineness of the precious metal and stuff like that. And the weight was certainly is far more of a measure of the quality of the intrinsic value of a precious metal.
Any of these two are exact replicas of each other. Look at these three here. These are all sort of slightly scaled down models. That doesn't work for me at all, purely on the basis that none of these are sort of uniform in their size. And of course, don't forget, I failed to mention the Dodechahedron. 20-sided object with no holes in whatsoever. There's only one of those, I think, been found. The Dodechahedron? Oh, forgive me. Measuring or surveying?
Before we go on measuring or surveying, not having only found 128 of these does not quantify how many of these were actually made and used. First of all, it's a metal object. So if it was used in a term in the field of battle, right? After battles are done, what happens? Men, soldiers from the victorious side go and they scavenge every single piece of metal that there is, from armor, swords, shoes, helmets, pocket thing. Well, not. I was going to say pocket watches, but like pocket amulets or whatever there was. They scavenged these all off the bodies after the battle. So you're not going to find a whole bunch of broken, bit down dodecahedrons necessarily on the battlefield. You might find some what look like musket balls or something like that, which would be something that broke off at high velocity and struck some poor soul. But these would be ones that hadn't been used yet, or perhaps that were still part of a stock or something like that. I'm not sure. But measuring and surveying, we're also going to have to throw that out because, Archimedes has well demonstrated from Grecian times in papyri and the other form of writing, about measuring and surveying. So this has never been mentioned in that, and it would have been had it been part. The plum is mentioned by Archimedes. So clearly, this is not a measuring and surveying object.
So I like this. It's kind of a clever idea, and again, there's a whole academic paper on this. Because we've got different hole size holes on either side, we can kind of look through it and measure a distance. I like this. If you hold it at a certain distance away from you, you can look through certain holes, and that would give you a distance of how far something is away. I love that idea. But if we were going down that route, then again, I think we'd find this in more noted surveying writings. That, combined with the fact that we have different size holes on different ones, doesn't really add up to me. And of course, we then see some markings on there. We'd see different markings to show different uses. Again, it's a great idea, but I can't seem to back this up with any substance whatsoever. Next up is a hugely popular one, a candle holder.
A hugely popular idea like the flat earth or tulips being more valuable than gold or amber. This is a ridiculous idea, but okay. And he thinks so as well, but go on.
Candle holder. And again, I love that. I could kind of just put this on a surface and it always sits level like that because of the nature of the shape, the dodecahedron shape. Hole in the top, boom, stick your candle in, job done. Love that, but no. Why are we making this of different shapes and sizes just to hold a candle? Such an intricate object when we could very easily make something much more simple to hold a candle. Okay, and finally, again, one of the most popular notions was this is a game or a dice or some kind of device that would be used for playing games. Again, I like it, but we have absolutely zero markings on it.
And furthermore, if this was such an intricate gaming piece, you would have more. You would have writings about it, like find chess pieces and backgammon pieces and certain dice pieces. You do find them occasionally, but there's writings, scrolls about them and stuff like that. There is nothing ever said about the dodecahedron being any part of a game. That it could be completely ruled out. It's not a twaddle, a twaddle, or whatever that is, a treadle, the thing you spin for the Jewish holiday, the dreidel, right? So it's clearly not a gaming piece. And I'm going to stick with what I say is, and what I'm saying is I believe that sometimes the simplest answer is the right answer, and that is being a projectile for war. But let's keep going.
We have nothing to accompany it. We have nothing to sort of say how we would use this. No contemporary writing. It's too elaborate in my head for a game. You could take all the nodules off and it would still look the same with regards to the shape and size and the holes. So for me, it's a big no. I like it, but it's a no. Okay, so what exactly do you think? First of all, do you think one of those that I've already covered in sort of debunked, for want of a better word, said no to? Do you think I'm actually wrong and one of those ideas is correct? Or perhaps you have another idea that we didn't cover in that? Well, maybe you do, then let me know in the comments below. But always think of the area, the location, the lack of symbols. Think of all those obvious things that sort of make it easy to say, well, no, the lack of where, that sort of thing. So what did I say? Last time I said I think it's probably ritual. The object feels really good, just hold and feel it. And I wonder if it did have a ritualistic notion to it. But we've only found 128 of these, and even if we scale that up and we do some kind of statistical analysis to say, well, we found 128, that means there were 3,000 of them. That, to my mind, isn't enough to be ritual. We have no writings from.
And here is another point that I'd like to interject is that I still believe that it was used or designed as a projectile for war. But there's also the possibility that it was not that effective. So maybe they just tried it out for, a couple of battles and just said, you know what, this isn't working very well, and they just stopped making them. That happens all the time. I mean, things just don't end up working the way they hope they do. So they just cease to produce them, and ergo, that's why you have such a limited supply of these things. That is another possible reason.
From the Romans to say that all the people of Gaul and Britain and the Celtic areas, they love these objects. We have nothing like that at all to go on. So for my new theory, I'm going to combine a couple of ideas on this. So first and foremost, I truly believe that these had no specific practical purpose, because everything you consider, absolutely everything you consider, always has a downside. There's always.
I absolutely disagree with him when he would say that it has no practical purpose. Why on earth, when he says they found 128, which would represent 3,000, would they make something that is not utilitarian? These societies back then were extremely utilitarian. Everything they did had a purpose. And this is not some ritualistic item that you would hold so that you could show, I'm the guy who's narrating right now, or I have the floor, or something like that. There's no record of that at all either. So that's ridiculous to me that it's not. To say that it's not has a utilitarian purpose is ridiculous, in my opinion.
Always something that gets in our way, whether it's a geography, lack of where, lack of symbols. Now, the one thing I've yet to mention is the test of skill, and a lot of you did mention test of skill, and I like that idea to a degree, but also, well, you can either make something or you can't. Why would you need to make this to test your skill? If you're making something, well, it is either works or it doesn't, so you don't necessarily need to say, oh, I've got one of these, therefore I am qualified. But what if instead this was kind of a combination? We don't need to prove our skill by making one of these, but we did, and we made one because that was what the community had, and it will become the fascination within that community. You hold this and you speak. This was something that was made within the community. That's important, and this was.
Yeah, but you look at the wide geographic range of this thing. So it would have had to have gone to England, France, Spain, even into the Germanic areas, because I think we saw some points in the Germanic areas. Why? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
This was then part of the meeting, part of the system. You hold this and you speak. You have the conch, the item in whatever way.
Which is totally ridiculous as well, because people are obstinate, right? So if some guy's got hold of this thing and he wants to keep talking, he's not going to give it up. There's going to be a big old fight over that thing. If you've got Sven and Svan and whoever, they're going to be killing each other to get a hold of that thing so they have the right to speak. Ridiculous idea.
Where it was sacred to that community, it was made by somebody within the community and maybe passed on from generation to generation. Hence why we find them only in certain areas. Hence why we find them without any wear, any symbol. Hence why we find them of a similar nature but not the same. So yeah, that's my theory. Nothing practical in terms of a physical purpose, not ritual, but for me, something that was symbolic within a community, something that meant something, a meeting place, conch, or something like that. That's where my money is if I had to place a bet. I've been Paul. If you've enjoyed this little ramble, we'll have a proper ramble next week, back outside, explore.
Okay, well, that's going to be enough for him on his take on that, which I just don't agree with anything that he says about the dodecahedron. I don't think he has much of an idea as to what it's for. Just as most people haven't, I mean, nobody's been able to solve it, right? So I just think that sometimes the most simple answer is the answer to these kinds of things. So what I would like to do is I'm going to have to, can I pause? I'm going to have to stop this and then add in another clip. So I'll do that, and I'll bring up the paper on the aerodynamics of the dodecahedron. Right. So I'm unable to find an actual paper that has the aerodynamic study of the dodecahedron. I have seen pieces of information through other papers. Anyway, I looked in Gemini, and here is what it says is why a dodecahedron would whistle. And it says the phenomenon of an object whistling when an air flows through is caused by vortex shedding and the resulting aeolian tone named after the Greek god of the wind, Aeolus. Anyway, it has to do with the bluff body of aerodynamics. All right, and it goes on further to explain the physics as to why a sound would be emitted of such an item hurtling through the air. And then it goes on to explain as to why the points on the edge of the dodecahedron would produce a tone. And here you have an actual calculation as to how long it would take or what speed it would take for these bullets to actually fly off from the dodecahedron, which the Romans would have had mathematical calculations to know such things. And then I asked the question if there was significant enough force once the bullet was released from the body of the dodecahedron, would it cause significant damage to a human body? And the answer is unequivocally yes, it would. And there is a formula there listed below that you can see. So it is really my belief that that these things are used out of utilitarian purposes, like most things. I mean, something that would take so much that much effort to cause to be able to cause so much damage. It would have to have a purpose. It is not just be a ritualistic thing or something to make knitting or weaving that was done with wood and stuff like that. So, I mean, you can just imagine, that you can see the proof in what I just showed you of the whistling sound that coming, and then there is proof that at a certain velocity, these beads would be released from the edges of the dodecahedron, and that further proof in mathematical form showing that it would cause significant damage to a human being had that small bead hit or punctured or whatever as a piece of shrapnel, bullet, or whatever you want to call it, done to another human being. Um, whether or not this was a successful thing that they continued on and did a lot of, I don't know. I don't even know if what I'm saying is what it is true. But it seems to me that sometimes the simplest answer is the easiest correct answer, and it just makes sense to me that this would be something that they would spend time and effort to make as far as for warfare purposes, and not for some ritual or anything like that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And like I said before, after battles, people pick up all pieces of metal off the battlefield and then bury the dead and whatnot. So it's rare that you would actually have a burial, a mass burial with swords and shields and stuff like that. That was reserved for people who were buried under prestigious circumstances and stuff like that. So the scavengers of war, you take all the metals and precious metals, whatever you can get, the victors would take away. That's why you wouldn't have them on the field. Anyway, that's my take on what the dodecahedron could possibly be. Doesn't mean that's what it was for, but it's what makes the most sense to me, that it was used as a flying projectile that with a terrifying sound and terrible consequences when those beads hit you, and could break up massive formations of armed men and women, soldiers.